In 1958, when I was a junior in high school, I was forced to take a foreign language. I took French. It was dull. In my senior year, I was forced to take French too. It was worse. French had no more attraction to me than geometry or any of the other dull pastimes that we were forced to undergo in high school. But I took it. And I went to college. My freshman year, had to take a foreign language. Well, it was no choice for me. I took French. That's what I had been studying, supposedly. But the French that I had been studying had no interest. As I told you, I never heard the language spoken, of course. It was just fill in the blank, conjugate the verb, j'entre dans la salle de classe. It was dull. So in my freshman year of college, I took French, and then finally, and my grammar was so bad that I had to repeat a grammar course. My sophomore year of college was the last year I was ever going to have to do with this damn language. But I saw that I could take a survey of French literature. And I thought, well, it's about time I got to do something useful or interesting with the language. I get to read something that some Frenchman had written. And so I took it, and I walked into the class, and I sat down with a bunch of freshmen and sophomores. And to my amazement, the professor, who was an enormous woman, chain-smoking cigarettes and walking up and down, pacing in front of the podium, was speaking this foreign language. And I heard her say something like, eh bien, les enfants, vous allez ouvrir vos livres à la page 292. And everybody opened their books to the page she had indicated in this foreign tongue. I couldn't understand a word. It was obvious I was in the wrong place. And so when the class ended, I went up to her and I said very politely, excuse me, I'm wrong class, can you tell me how to change to a level more suitable for my abilities, as small as they are? And she fixed her beady eyes on me, and she said, you stay and you work. Oui, madame. So I did. And across the semester and into the next one, an extraordinary thing happened, completely against my will, and probably because I was already an actor, I began to enjoy the sounds of this beautiful language. And I began to get interested in the culture and the history and the art and the architecture and the people that had spawned all this. Little by little, those foreign words on the textbook page came alive for me. And by the end of that year, my sophomore year, I was going around and imitating Marseillais accents and enjoying figuring out where in Paris the Louvre was in relationship to Notre Dame and figuring out metro lines and so forth. I was hooked. Hadn't intended it. I had intended to be a psychology major and a philosophy minor. Didn't work out that way. I was a French major. And in those days, what does a French major do when he graduates from college? He teaches it. And so I did. And I started my teaching career as a French teacher at the age of 21. Well, years went by, and I found myself in Philadelphia in 1969, having taught for 6 years or so, a member of a very, very fine French department in a very fine boys' school in northwest Philadelphia called Chestnut Hill Academy. And there I really learned my trade. I was married at the time, and I had 3 daughters right in a row, and I had not much money. I was making about $6,800 a year. And my students were amazed that I hadn't gone to France yet. We go every year, said one. You can stay, thought I. There was no understanding in terms of the economy of why I hadn't gone to France with 3 daughters and a wife who was not working outside the home to add income. And so the dream of going to France, which animated me and which was driving a force in my life, had to be put on hold. It was indeed a dream deferred. And yet I thought about it all the time. I thought about going to France and touching the walls of Notre Dame, where kings and queens had walked. Well, in order to make some more money, and in order to provide for my family, I took a job, a second job, a 4 to 11 job. And I worked as a security guard at the Univac Corporation, owned by Sperry Rand in the days when computers occupied huge buildings and not tiny little blocks. And so I would leave my swank boys' school at 3:30 in the afternoon and drive up to Fort Washington, Pennsylvania, and put on a badge and put on a uniform and become a guard. I took that job because it was the only one I could take and think of where I could also have a good deal of free time, where I could plan my lessons, correct papers, and think about the next day's work back at the boys' school. One story from the boys' school to indicate the economic disparity between my students and the teachers. I overheard a freshman say to another freshman, "Next summer, my dad's going to take me around the world." And the other one said, "I've been there, it's cool." We lived in different worlds. And we certainly lived in different worlds when I was sitting in the guardhouse at the Univac Corporation checking ID badges and opening doors for people who had forgotten their keys. The Univac Corporation was huge. And my job was to take a DTEX clock, as it was called, with a little key on the end of it attached, and once an hour go through the entire plant. Some people are nodding in recognition and clicking a station to indicate on a tab inside the clock that I had indeed fulfilled my duty and made my rounds. But that was once every hour or so. And my fellow guard, because there were always two of us, would take the other shift. So there was a good deal of free time. My partner from time to time was a man named Briley. Now, nobody knew Briley's first name. It was just Briley. Now, Briley would come to work in a beat-up 58 DeSoto, rusted out, with its tailpipe dragging and kicking on the gravel next to where we parked. Briley would get out and hoist his enormous frame, because he weighed close to 320 pounds, I'm sure, into the guardhouse and sit. Briley never seemed to shave, and his hat was always askew, and his tie was always down. But he would rest his hands comfortably across his enormous girth and sit. Most of the other guards would bring something with them to pass the time. A newspaper, a magazine, a Playboy, anything. Crossword puzzles. Not Briley. He sat, contented, until it was time for him to make his rounds. He rarely spoke unless spoken to. And one night, he yawned, and I said to make conversation, "A little tired tonight, Brile?" "Oh, yeah," he said in his South Central Pennsylvania accent. "Oh, yeah, I didn't get much sleep last night at all." "Oh," said I, encouraging the conversation. "No, I had to pick the wife up at the airport. She was coming in from Honolulu." I said, "From Honolulu, Briley?" Yeah. I said, "Well, what was she doing in Honolulu? Was it a vacation or?" No. She works for the DuPont people. And she's the one that knows how to fix the machines, for the paint. And so they had a place there that she had to fix the machine. "Oh," said I, and went off to my DTEX clock rounds. Walked around the plant trying to take that in, came back, and I was, of course, intrigued. I said, "Briley, have you been to Honolulu?" "Oh, yeah, twice." "You see, we go on the company plane. The DuPont people have the company plane." And we've been, she went one time, she went to South America, and you know what she brought back? A ocelot. You know what is an ocelot? It's an animal. And we couldn't keep it. Had to give it to the Philadelphia Zoo. And one time then we went to Paris, France. I said, what? I said, what'd you say? We went to Paris, France to fix the machine there on the DuPont plane. I said, Briley, you've been to Paris? Oh, yeah. What did you do? Well, stayed mostly in the hotel because I didn't understand, if they talk English. And there's a place in the bottom of the hotel where you could change your money and go out, but I didn't do that much. I waited for her to get finished with the machines that she's fixing. But it was down by the river, and on the other side of the river was more of the city. Oh. I staggered off to do my rounds, and I came back, and I said, so you went to Paris, brother? Oh, yeah. And the plane's never full, you can go too if you want. I said, would you say that? What do you mean? He said, well, you could pretend to be my brother or something because they don't care none. And I said, are you saying that I can go to Paris with you? Oh, yeah, nothing. Because never know when we're going to go, though. I went home that night, staggered by what I had been a part of. And I was picturing strolling down the Champs-Élysées and going into a cafe and saying, un grand crème, s'il vous plaît. And watching the life of Paris move around me. But Briley? And so I called the captain of the guard unit that had hired me. And he was a reasonable fellow. And I said, Larry, I spent last night on duty with Briley. You know Briley, of course. Oh, yeah, he said. I said, Larry, could Briley's wife maintain a job, an important job? Could she possibly be employed in a professional capacity? There was a pause on the phone. And Larry said, has he been talking about ocelots? I said, yeah. And more. There was a sigh. I could hear him sigh. Because in 1969, telephone reception was a lot better than it is today. And Larry said, Briley is harmless, but he lives in his mind. And most of everything that he says comes from somewhere, but we don't know where. So there were no ocelots. There were no trips to Honolulu or Paris, France. And the next night, feeling as though I had been delivered a blow in the gut to my dream deferred, I went back to UNIVAC after a day of teaching French at Chestnut Hill, put on my uniform again, put on my badge again, opened doors for employees of UNIVAC who needed to get to this room or that, and watched Briley arrive in his rusted-out DeSoto with the tailpipe dragging on the ground. Thank you.